Capitola, come to the coast with me. The sun and the sky are free. We'll play in the sand and sea. Capitola, paradise you'll adore. I'll take your hand there on the sand along the shore.
We are here with Ron Graves, longtime Capitola resident and former member of the City Council, to talk about some of Capitola's more recent history and a little bit of his family history. Thank you so much for being part of the Capitola Memories Project.
Now, it's a pleasure to do this for you.
So tell me a little bit about your background. When and where were you born?
I was born in Santa Cruz on Pacheco Avenue, of course in the old Sisters Hospital, they called it in those days. I lived there until I was 4 years old, then moved to San Jose and came back here to Santa Cruz, or Capitola actually, where we're at today, in 1966. And this was my grandparents' home after they retired from Santa Cruz.
Tell us a little bit more about your grandparents.
My grandfather was one of the first people on the committee to form Capitola as a city back in 1949. So he was here for a number of years at that time. My grandfather was a veterinarian in Santa Cruz, the first veterinarian that worked on all types of animals, everything from horses and cattle to birds and anything anybody brought to him. When I came to visit when I was preteen, this was preteen, one of my jobs was to, on a saw over on Pacheco Avenue, cut out little Scotty dogs and little cats that were sitting on their hind quarters. And he had done some work up in the Mount Herman Road area for some people that had cattle, and as a result of that, had donated some land for a pet cemetery. The pet cemetery still exists to this day. It was just a lovely area, and people brought their special pets there to be buried. I don't know how many Scotty dogs I whitewashed and how many cats I painted black and white, but we'd go up there, and it was really all sand fill at that time, and so the things that grew most were ferns and stuff like that. And so we'd go each summer and go up with some hoes and sickles and stuff and kind of clean up a lot around the little gravestones, and the cats and the dogs were the gravestones. And so I'm proud of that. I think that was a good thing that my grandfather did. He was originally located right across from the Santa Cruz Wharf, where the bikini shop is now, and some few years later moved to Pacheco Avenue, where there, after he retired, became a chicken ranch, and it was almost a full block on Pacheco Avenue.
Do you know when he came to Santa Cruz?
I do not. I know he was a veterinarian for 34 years.
That's in Santa Cruz?
Yes. I see. And he came from somewhere in the Modesto area. I don't know where.
When did he retire?
In the 40s, probably mid-40s. He got here probably 47, 48. I'm guessing about that time. I visited him every summer in this home and lived out of a suitcase like everybody did, and was able to work both at the Capitola Wharf, at Seacliff Beach State Park, and the concession stand, and also worked for the merry-go-round operator here in Capitola when I was a teenager.
Oh.
And this was prior to '66. This was back in the mid-50s. In the evenings when I was visiting in the summertime, and I stayed most summers, the full 3 months with my grandparents here in this house, I became friends with Andy and Laverne Antonelli, and they owned the poker ski roll place, which is now Zelda's today, and that incorporated the deck, which is their outdoor seating, and we had a merry-go-round and a small car ride there. I worked the merry-go-round in the evenings, worked the days when I was staying with my grandfather and grandmother on the Capitola Wharf. And so I had kind of like two jobs. They didn't pay a lot, but they were a lot of fun.
Now, when you were working there as a teenager, was the old Bandstand building still there, the round?
Yes, yes. And it was owned by Babe Yakovovich and his wife, and I have many tales about that. They made the most fantastic French fries in the world, and I don't mean just the town. They were great. And The only thing is that if you ask, they're both dead now, so I can say this, when you asked them for ketchup, they gave it to you in little bitty cups that were so small you could hardly dip the end of the potato chip in. Evidently, ketchup was an expensive item for that operator, and I remember it so well.
What all did they sell there?
They had great hot dogs and hamburgers. They had all the soft drinks. They sold some candy apples. They sold a lot of things out of a front window, and all the seating was where the present door is today. It wasn't a full-blown kitchen. The kitchen was basically right in the middle of that, all the bandstand there, and you could see Babe cook, and you could see his wife's name just came to me, Jane. She would bring the stuff out to you at the counters, and she would also wait on children and mothers and kids in bathing suits at the front window. Quite an enterprise, really fun. I lived in this house with my grandparents. I was a teenager, had a neighbor across the street who every night after he went fishing would come up here and knock on the door and get me, and we'd go down for root beer floats. So I remember they had those. That's how I got this big. No, I'm just kidding.
There were quite a few arcade type games along there at that time, weren't there?
Yes. Everything from where the present Paradise Bar and Grill is, which was the old Edgewater, down to the one cafe that was there on the path going down to the beach by the end of the river where it was dammed each year. That was all gaming things. So it was gaming for both youth and seniors. When I came to town, bingo was a big thing because it was not controlled by the state like it is today. So the grown-ups went to bingo, the kids went in the arcade, and there was everything in the arcades. The Zelda's was, of course, Pokerino and Ski Roll were the only things, and you did those things for little coupons, and you amassed enough coupons, probably spent twice whatever your prize was on coupons, but you couldn't wait to get something out of their trophy case, they called it.
Yeah, I've read a little bit about the Pokerino. Now, was that the strictly manual kind of game, or was it an electronic version?
I'm trying. The Pokerino was both. You rolled balls into holes, and the electronic backboard would tell you what kind of a poker hand you had. And points were distributed through coupons, little tickets, for lack of a better word, depending on whether you got a full house, whether you got 4 of a kind, 5 of a kind, whatever it was, a straight flush, whatever. And so that was the way that run. Of course, ski roll was rolling a ball up a ramp into 4 rings, and the rings had different denomination in them, and it was something for everybody. Grown-up, I don't want to say this, grown-ups could use the Pokerino, kids could use the ski roll, but both used both. So it wasn't exclusive to one or the other.
So I guess Capitola was a little different then from the way it is now.
Yes, it was quite different. However, some of the problems never go away, parking being one of them. Even during the early years that I was here in Capitola in the 50s, parking was a problem. The only time we didn't have parking problem in the village was after the yacht harbor was built and the beach went away. We really had a very vacant village. Most people don't remember that. People were living in storefronts rather than being businesses.
What about you personally? What did you do for a living?
I started to work for PG&E and worked for them for 33 years. Left their employ on a golden handshake when they were downsizing prior to them filing bankruptcy and coming back, of course, and everything else. But I worked the majority of my career here in Santa Cruz and was blessed to be able to work in all the areas of Santa Cruz, all the way from Boulder Creek to Watsonville and the Pajaro area.
Well, you must have gotten to know the county pretty well.
Very, very well. It's the new streets that confuse me.
And how is it that you eventually moved to Capitola?
My grandmother died very unexpectedly, and my grandfather could not live alone in this house because he needed care. So my mother and dad brought him to San Jose to live in our house in Willow Glen. He was there a few years, had some trouble with my mother in that he was a little bit senile, and I don't mean in a bad way, but they chose to be right fighters, I always call it. And so eventually they found a place for him down in the Morgan Hill, Gilroy area, where he was on a farm with animals and everything else. And he spent his last years, I'm sure, very happy there.
And you then moved into this house?
This house stayed as a vacation house for quite a while. My wife and I had 2 children. They were 2 and 4 when I moved here. And because this was sitting vacant, I asked my dad and mom if I could come over and use the house and pay rent. And I've been here ever since.
I guess you're not paying rent anymore.
No, but the upkeep seems like rent.
Well, of course, I know that you were on the city council for many, many years. How did you become interested in politics?
When I arrived here in '66, there weren't a lot of things that you could do in the wintertime in Capitola. The beach was basically not used during those months, and so I started attending Capitola City Council meetings because it's only a block away. I found them more entertaining than the movie theater that the Audrey Jacobs and her family ran downtown, so I became a fixture at the council chambers, talked to some issues even though I was very young, but how I got involved was twofold. First of all, there was a fire chief in town called Harold Jarvis, and Harold would attend the meetings regularly because he only had to walk from the firehouse across the street, and he lived behind City Hall in the Peery Park neighborhood. He encouraged me to run. At the same time at PG&E, they were giving classes on your own time on how to get involved in the community. I took that class, and the combination of both. Harold basically said, "Ron, I'll show you how to campaign," and he says, "I'll find you somebody that'll foot the bill for your campaign." My first campaign cost $15.63. Interesting campaign, because what happened with the $15.63 was that they basically gave me a business card that says, "Hello, my name is Ron Graves, and I live in Capitola, and I'm a candidate for city council." And I walked door to door, handed them out, talked to people. The insistence, though, by the person that spent the $15.63, I'll never forget this, the business card had to have a union label. And it was printed over at Mission Printers on Soquel Avenue in Santa Cruz. I can remember that.
And when was it that you first got elected to the council?
1968, and served a number of succeeding council elections, somewhere around 24 years or something like that. I thought I was a shoo-in for another term, and I lost by 26 votes, I think it was, to Stephanie Harlan. Stephanie Harlan is out with my wife right now. We're best of friends, so it didn't hurt me at all. I came back on the council and served 2 more interrupted terms, so I had a total of 34 years on the city council.
Wow.
I served as mayor 3 times because they were appointed positions by your peers, and so it was kind of interesting. My city council mayor days were 72, 82, and 92, all 10 years apart. So it was kind of a whim type of thing.
So what were some of the challenges that Capitola faced while you were on the council, besides parking, of course?
Yeah, the first big issue when I first ran was that everyone on the council was blaming everybody for the loss of beach sand down in the village. And of course they were blaming the Yacht Harbor and the Corps of Engineers. And when I decided to run, I decided that my speaking point would be, let's not blame anybody, let's see if we can find something to correct the problem rather than try to place blame. We were able to get the Army Corps of Engineers to come back and create a groin down at the east end of the beach, and the hardest part of that was that we were not allowed to trap all the sand and silt coming down Soquel Creek we had to import thousands of yards of sand by truck to what they called charge the beach, so that we would not deplete sand from the down coast communities. And that was the real expense part of it.
I've read that sand was trucked in for the beach. That must have been expensive.
That was the most expensive part. The groin was the cheap part.
Now, when I go down there, it seems like there are actually two groins. Were those built at separate times, or?
The only groin that was truly built by the city is the one right at the end of Monterey Avenue, right in front of the public restrooms now.
The bigger one.
The bigger one. The other was a makeshift idea to trap sand underneath the crest apartments and kind of preserve the bluffs there that were sloughing off. However, my view at that time was that the bluffs were sloughing off simply because of groundwater between the hard pan and the loose dirt on top of the cliff. So it was always a natural occurring thing, and it wasn't the pounding of the waves against the cliffs that really caused the slough off. I'm no engineer, but that's what's happened all my life, and I'm way up there in years.
What other changes have you seen in Capitola over the years?
Well, a number of them. When I first came here, the state of California was maintaining the beach, and they were not maintaining it at all. So in some ensuing years, we were able to get the beach into city ownership and care, and then it became groomed, and it stayed groomed. And of course, we saw troubles with the wharf, having to rebuild it, and we were very successful in getting some government agency to help us and assist us with that. The present council is having to deal with it again some 20, 30 years later. You know, it's one of those things when you're in a saltwater environment, most things don't stay the way they are. Rust comes, so does the pounding of the waves. You can depend on it. Of course, probably the biggest thing that changed Capitola was that the intersection at 41st and Capitola Road was mostly farmland when I came here. The Al family, who has the property where Orchard Supply is today, decided that they were going to buy some land there, and they sold part of that land that they bought for the service station for what they paid for all of the land. And you know how big the shopping center is there now, with the cinemas there, and Orchard Supply recently remodeled. Across the street where our Capitola Mall was of course pasture land, and Brown's Bow Branch more immediately to the west of what you see at 41st and Capitola Road. So that's all in my time here. I saw all that changes. You know, Capitola Road was a two-lane road. Portola was a two-lane road with gullies on each side. I mean, there were no curbs and storm drains and stuff like that.
Was there concern as 41st Avenue began to develop as the main business district that that would have a negative impact on the village?
Nobody ever expressed that, because I don't think at that time they were looking for a revenue source. And they realized that they could probably leave the village unspoiled and have that revenue source be 41st Avenue. My concern on the council was that I was not 100% in favor of the mall and that up there, not because I didn't want that revenue source up there. I believed that it was designed wrong. I thought that the mall should be located more out on the avenues, both Capitola Road and 41st Avenue, and that the parking should have been hidden. I still feel that way today.
That would give it a different look.
It would really. Down in Santa Barbara, they have a mall downtown that looks Spanish in origin. The parking's underground. It really works, and it saved the old town.
Well, what are some of the other kinds of changes? You were here you were on the council during quite a few improvements. What about like Jade Street Park or the City Hall involved?
City Hall was where City Hall is now, but it was also a corporation yard in the early days. In fact, the City Hall chambers were where they stored the City Hall maintenance equipment, and the street sweeper basically sat just behind the Capitola Museum, and so did a very large bulldozer for damming the creek. So that change transpired. It was a good one. The one thing Capitola was missing was recreation facilities in the neighborhood. We had the beach, which is obviously a great recreation area, but we wanted some parks, and we fostered a bond issue that failed terribly. In the ensuing 8 years, we were able to, with the revenue from 41st and other things, buy most of the properties that were on the bond issue, and so we have some neighborhood parks today.
One of the things I was wondering is the City Hall building, was that entirely new, or did they start with some of the original building that was there?
Yeah, Capitola City Hall is in the same place it was when I arrived here. It's been rebuilt. The council chambers are where the present-day police department is, and the city council chambers themselves were directly behind that, where the community room is today. The portion of the building that now houses the council chambers was the maintenance facility, and city public works equipment was stored there. They used the concrete part of the first floor, the cinder block, as the basis for building the offices upstairs and the rest of it. But basically, very little of the original was retained.
So what are you most proud of the different accomplishments that you had while on the council?
Well, many. Obviously, being able to have the mall located in Capitola, that was a major undertaking. LAFCO was involved, annexation was involved. I'm very proud of getting the Wharf into city ownership, the beach into city ownership. I mentioned earlier the parks that were able to be created without the bond issue passing. I was really proud that we were able to get rid of a tax on the city of Capitola's residents, and that was called a street lighting district. All the utility poles had street lights on them, but we were paying a fee out of the city coffers, and we were able to disenfranchise from that, and didn't have to have that tax anymore. One of the few communities in this part of the country that ever got rid of a tax. That was kind of an interesting one. I'm proud of the Jade Street complex that we were able to do with the auspices of the school district. They owned the land. We were able to build the community center, the tennis courts, the soccer field, and now, of course, they have a daycare center there for younger children, and we still have a cooperative venture with them, although it had its trying times over the years. We started a adult recreation program in the city, and we did that out of the school up what is now known as New Brighton Junior High, or middle school. That's where our first adult program started. Now our adult takes place over at the community center. So we organized a recreation department for the first time in the city. We went from a budget of about $100,000 to what it is today in the millions. And so I'm proud of all that.
Were you involved at all in the creation of Cortez Park up in the Cliffwood Heights neighborhood?
That was one of the ones that was to be paid for by a bond issue, but we were able to, through the development of the housing there, be able to get a donation of land from the developer, and all we did really went in and put the amenities into it. And the amenities weren't much at first because people did not want it to be an active, noisy park. Noise was always a big issue in residential neighborhoods.
That park fascinates me because I've heard 4 different names for that park. Do you know what its official name is?
No, I've always thought of it as Cortez Park because
so I picked the right one. Then.
Yeah, because the entry is from there. So, right. And that's the reason I picked that too. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've also heard it called Triangle Park. I first knew it as Hidden Park.
Okay.
And then there's a map that the Chamber of Commerce did. They call it Cliffwood Park, which I thought was interesting.
The whole area was called Cliffwood Heights.
I see.
And that's probably where the Cliffwood come. I had not heard of Hidden Park because the big issue in the old days was Hidden Beach, and that's down the coast, more closely associated with New Brighton all the way down to Manresa and down in there. So, Hidden's kind of a new one for me. I don't remember that.
What about Peery Park or Peery Park? Which is the correct pronunciation?
I think it's Peery.
Peery?
That's my go on it anyway. Peery Park was a very interesting and important fishing hole for the citizens and residents of Soquel and Capitola. It had a bend in the river at that time, Soquel Creek there, and it undercut the big rock that's part of Peery Park today. Peery Park was actually built to the left of that area. It was a land deal that was instituted by the then mayor without much council approval. He lived up on Central, not Center, Central Center. Peery Park's at the end of Central is where he lived, and his name was Phil Walker. It was part of it had a lot to do with the establishment of getting the museum moved to its present location at City Hall, along with the placing of the apartments that really don't fit in a residential neighborhood. And I'm talking about the apartments that you don't even realize nowadays are much of apartments, but the ones that back right up to Nob Hill Center there. And there was some trades going on. It wasn't, you talk about open government, it kind of appeared as one agenda item after he had arranged everything. More power to him. Sorry.
Well, at least you got some things accomplished.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Well, now, do I dare mention the Rispin Mansion? Give me your thoughts on that.
The Rispin Mansion, I have several thoughts on it. The Rispin Mansion, I first was able to go into as a PG&E employee for heating and other types of ventures, replacing gas meter and stuff like that. And the sisters were still cloistered there, and it was in operation at that time. I was off the city council when the city council decided to purchase the property. I supported that purchase, and I still do today. However, I had bigger aspirations for it. One of the times when I was mayor many years ago, it's been over 28 I think now, I was approached by the people that were doing our general plan 28 years ago or how many years ago, as to would we be willing to basically let them buy it and lease it back for City Hall.
Let who buy it?
Let the Charles Delkin Associates, the people that were doing our general plan on contract with us. They wanted to buy the property and build a City Hall on it. We would lease it back for X number of years. My memory recalls that it was to be leased back, and I don't remember the number of years, but like for $300,000 a year. But they would make all the improvements, totally all the improvement. It went over like the biggest lead balloon that Ron ever proposed. Everybody did not want City Hall to move from down here in the village. And it kind of came back to haunt us a few years back, 2 years back, I think it was, when they wanted to sell the City Hall and relocate it up on Monterey Avenue and build a hotel there. I think the feelings haven't changed that much. So the only bad feature that I think about with Rispin is it's taken so many years to do anything with it, and we've had such great losses with burning down of the what I would call the north end of what was there, which was not the same construction as the original Rispin that you see today. It was newer construction that was burnt down, along with a house on Wharf Road that was a caretaker's place after the sisters left, that was burnt down also. It's where the center gate was. So I'm sorry to see so much of history destroyed. And then I was sorry to see putting so much money into what almost became a rat hole. Now it's kind of tombstoned. It's been a new roof. They had a recent fire, new roof. And they're planning for some gardens and stuff. I was a part of that committee. I think it's good to restore the grounds. I don't have any clairvoyant crystal ball as to what it should be. My idea was to make a great city hall, and we would have built a new council chambers out on that upper terraced area just directly behind the wall. But like I say, it was a bad idea because I'm supposed to put people's ideas, not my ideas, to work type of thing. I'm not really enthralled with the Soquel Creek plan with regards to how we get the wildlife that used to be back, and I'm thinking of the fish because I was a fisherman for years. In the 50s, in order to control the amount of oxygen in the water in Soquel Creek when it was dammed up at the far end, was my grandfather would take a gunny sack with bluestone in it, a banned substance today, and I would row, and we'd go down, and any place there was grass and weeds growing up through the water, we would cut that down. We never had any fish kills in those days that we knew about. When you went down in the evening, the amount of trout jumping for flies and mosquitoes and other things down here were in probably the hundreds of thousands. Today, if you see a trout at all, and my comment is I think that they're keeping the beach and the Soquel Creek dammed up way too long. The steelhead and the silver salmon and the rest of the salmon that used to come up this creek do not have an opportunity now. You can go in the early month of September, early part of September, and used to see them jumping off the wharf and the rest of it. As the years progressed and they didn't open it after, they used to open the river the week after Begonia Festival. Now it's months after Begonia Festival. And so those fish are not able to return to their indigenous habitat. And I don't think it's a lack of water. I think it's a problem that man's created. And I'm no scientist, but I lived through both eras, and I know that we're not helping the fish. We're not, the big reason for keeping it dammed is a small fish. I've read the report thoroughly. Is called a tidewater goby. I don't think most people have ever seen a tidewater goby, and I'm not sure what it's good for. I've never heard of anybody eating it or having it in a fish tank or enjoying it in any way possible, but evidently it's a precursor to the health of a creek and stuff like that. My comment is the larger fish were more of a precursor to what was good in a creek, and we had steelhead every year here. I mentioned the hole behind Nob Hill all the way up. I fished this creek since I was 14 years old and still do occasionally, and it's really been degraded, and it's not because of the building, it's because of the opening to the ocean more than anything else, in my estimation.
What is the rule now about fishing along the creek? Can you still fish along the creek?
Not any longer except for steelhead. Trout fishing has gone away years ago, and the trout were never huge. They were, 6 inches. An 8-inch trout was a monster back in my early days, but of course the limit was 15, dropped to 5, dropped to 2. Steelhead is still 2, but now steelhead is all catch and release. They have not, they're a bigger precursor of what's happening to our river. I did a walk up and down Soquel Creek to try and find the effluent that was getting into the creek. We tested many springs where water was bubbling up and stuff. We made sure sewer lines were intact. We did a lot of smoking of the sewers along the river. There was a sewer line that ran just where Riverview Avenue up here at the corner turns to go up to Oak Avenue, that ran all under all the houses that were built before, and it was a main sewer line, but it was abandoned and it still had water in it. It couldn't have been good for the creek. We've done away with all that and moved it out into the stream. One of the other things that has always concerned me, but in a different way, and that is well, we started out with talking about traffic and parking. For years, I had the most harebrained scheme in the world, and that was to buy what is now Nob Hill, the sewer plant, the sleep center for PAMP, the old Grimes property, they called it in those days, and make it a parking lot. And my idea was that you made the parking free, but that you put an aerial gondola that went down Soquel Creek and basically ended up in the village. Today, people still want to get rid of parking in the village, but they have no other scheme. And so I say this is another one of my harebrained ideas, but I still think it could have worked. It was lots of bucks in those days. And of course, the environment, everybody was concerned, how do you put an aerial gondola down Soquel Creek and not ruin the environment? And I seemed to think I had the answers. I had seen many of the high energy power lines throughout the state of California. People go in and build the cement foundation, but the actual superstructure, the metal structure that would hold the gondola and the cables, was all set by helicopters and stuff like that. So there would have been little or no damage to the environment. It's a harebrained scheme, but it comes up every once in a while.
We, of course, often talk about the village. Where do you feel the boundary line for the village is? How far up Capitola Avenue before you're out of the village and you reach the upper village?
Okay, well, the upper village was something that wasn't an upper village when I first came here. The village, really, in my start here, extended to the railroad trestle. And that was probably the extent of it. And then as things developed across the street from City Hall, and as City Hall was rebuilt to its present configuration, lots of commercial businesses moved in up along the avenue. And you couldn't call it the middle village, so it was kind of called the upper village. But in the old days, the upper village was from where Monterey Bay Avenue joined there, right at Capitola Avenue, where Gale's Bakery is, and on up all the way to the freeway. That was upper village. The middle was the middle. And of course, we had in those days, where Nob Hill was, we had, what was it called, Disco or whatever it was, the kind of a department store, grocery store, everything catch-all. And before that, I knew it as a berry field.
What sort of berries did they grow?
You know, I really can't answer that. I was too young to tell you the difference between a lollaberry and a raspberry, so I don't know.
I've heard that that was a berry farm there.
It was, yeah. I believe that one time most of the property up in that area was in the Baccaria family. Baccaria was a city councilman early on with me. He didn't have any connection with that, so it was probably his parents and stuff, and they were more located on the eastern side of Bay Avenue, where the real estate office is today. Yeah, I remember the berries very well. They were very well maintained, you know.
Do you remember the flood of 1982?
Yes, I do.
Anything bad happen in Capitola? Or?
Yeah, I had to give up and going to my re-election party to help dig out the Venetian court. And so we didn't really have an election party. We wanted to get things back as early as possible. And on the city council, we did some, what I thought was remarkable things for government. Government seems to crawl when private enterprise seems to move more rapidly. And I think to get back the village back to what it was and the rest of it, we needed to suspend a lot of rules and regulations and really help people get back. I don't mean monetary help, but time-wise help, the permit process, the rest of it. And a lot of that had to do with if they agreed to build back what they had without embellishing it and doing things. We were able to do some remarkable things in a very short period of time. I'm very proud of that. I think that worked really well.
So did the creek overtop the bank and actually flood the village? Or,
the creek didn't flood the village as much as it my neighbors across the street here and some water in this street out in front. The main problem with with the storm and the whole thing, the flood, was that the debris coming down the creek balled up on the Stockton Avenue Bridge. And so it made like a dam or a barrier. And so the backed up water came into homes up here and under homes up here. If you had seen when they've just removed the flooring of the house across the street, the amount of silt under that house was just remarkable. The village itself took more of a pounding from the high surf. There was a confluent thing of two things happening. Lots of water coming down the creek and out of Noble Gulch, which runs under this house, and the wave action, and the wave was an extremely high tide, and it was a combination of both. You probably wouldn't have that happen again very often.
Yeah, I know, especially a year later in '83, there was some really big waves that came right up into the village a little bit.
Yes, yeah. At that time, wave action is really more detrimental unless you have both of them occurring, water coming down the creek, and poses more of a problem to the village than anything. And again, because the costs are so prohibitive, I wanted to suggest, and did suggest at the time, that we use throwback walls, similar to what they use in some of the European areas and other things. And basically, the wall looks like a wave on the ocean side, so it goes up and throws it back. You don't see any of them down there. There's a little bit of a cap on the seawall along the Esplanade, but that's not what I envisioned. I envisioned a throwback wall. We used instead a lot of riprap. If you go under the sand along the seawall and in front of the Zeldas and the River's End and the rest, there are still some of the boulders that were imported to try and break up the ocean action in the future. And of course, high wave action is what hurts the wharf and hurts anything on the coastal line.
Yes, I know the storm of '83 did quite a bit of damage to the wharf.
Yes, that's after that is when we put in the steel piles at the end, the battering piles as they call. And now I heard in one of the latest council meetings that the metal pinning of the wharf vents to those pilings is rusting out, and that's what they need this remodeled, redo, whatever you want to call it. I'm a firm believer, having worked on the wharf in 56, 57, and part of 58, that you don't want to stabilize a wharf. You want it to have give. You want it to move. Otherwise, it'll just come down and be a pile of logs in the surf. I'm not sure that they've not made me convinced that widening the wharf is the answer. I think the problem has been the wharf hasn't been a working wharf, and I say that. If we had a wharfinger that was there all the time, when a piling is destroyed, like when the sailboat got into it, it would be replaced in the months following, but that's never happened. They always wait for a big project instead of doing the small project, and I think that that's going to be bore out by the cost of what they're anticipating doing now. One of the great things that we may get out of the rebuild of the wharf, now that the ballot measure passed, is that we may get restrooms at the end of the wharf where it attaches to the sand, because we sorely need restrooms on that end of the beach. We have them on the east end, but that's a long way for children and parents and stuff to go, so I'd like to see that happen.
So how did you fare during the Loma Prieta earthquake?
I moved out of here. Let's put it this way. I was coming home from work because it was, about 7 minutes after 5 or something like that?
5:04.
Okay. You got a better memory than I have there.
Well, there's a book by that title.
I was coming home from PG&E. I got off at 5 o'clock. I was working 2 shifts, or two different jobs at PG&E. Driving home in my PG&E truck, and I can remember I was going by the radio towers on the East Cliff Drive side of the lagoon there, and as I was starting to climb the hill, I said, "What's wrong with my truck?" Not realizing it was the ground moving. And then I looked up at the power poles, and at the end of the shock, it was like the biggest snap, like somebody hit a bullwhip on those wires on top of the pole. They just become taut and then slack. And as I looked ahead towards the 26th Avenue beach and up towards the 30s and all the way up to 41st Avenue, because I continued home in my PG&E truck, at 41st Avenue, you couldn't see the road for the amount of dirt that had fallen down into the ocean and the cloud of brown dust, for lack of a better thing. I came home here. My wife had not arrived home from work, thank God. The house was in turmoil. I turned off the utilities here. I turned off several of my neighbors. One of my neighbors across the street obviously had something wrong. I didn't have time to knock on his door and ask him why, but I turned off his gas meter. It turned out that his water heater had fallen over and broken the gas line, so I shut that off, and basically I was back to work 20 minutes later and did not really give up working until almost May of the following year. And at that time, just before that time, we had some people come in here and redo the shower in the bathroom. It had pulled the sink off. It had broke the shower door off the tile wall. The shaking was north to south. It was not east to west. It was very apparent what happened. But I fared well. We stayed in Scotts Valley. What little we had some friends up there, and they survived. They were in a good area and had some extra bedrooms, and so.
Well, that's an event none of us who were here at the time will ever forget.
No. I can remember that the first night on Laurel Street. I was back there almost every hour on the aftershocks, and the gas pipe on the streets to the left, Felix Street and a few of the others, were pulling apart every 21 feet because pipe comes in 21-foot sections and is put together every 21 feet. And we finally just got into Laurel Street, dug down, and the crews did. I called them. I was not a crewman. I was a serviceman. Got them out there, and we just abandoned all the lines in the area that is what we know as Upper Neary Lagoon, and up in there now. It was so liquefied that nothing stayed together. It was really bad. The ice plant burnt down over there by the railroad tracks. There was a lot of damage in that area. I'm really enthusiastic about Capitola, though. I think it's got a lot to offer people. I think that it's not worse today. It's probably better today for a lot of reasons. I think it's very family-oriented. I think we have a great City Hall Police Department, fabulous police department in my estimation. For a town that goes from 10,000 people in the wintertime to on any given weekend can have 30 or 40,000 people in it. Some people in town say police department's too big. You can't hire a policeman for a weekend. And so I'm enthusiastic about it.
Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful talking with you and getting your perspectives on Capitola and learning more about your family history. Thank you so much for being part of the Capitola Memories Project.
Well, thank you for asking me.
Capitola, come to the coast with me. The sun and the sky are free. We'll play in the sand and sea. Capitola, paradise you'll adore. I'll take your hand there on the sand along the shore. Capitola, over the bridge we'll go. We'll capture the sunset glow and wait for the creek to flow. Capitola, sway to the ocean's roar. Beside the strand we'll hear the band down by the shore. Capitola, Capitola.